wasn't even called social selling, right? The term was not even around in 2011. Best thing is to actually drill deeper with your customer. First, it's the mindset, Will, that is really important for people. Before we even get into the tools, people have to sort of understand the mindset of it.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm your host, Will Barron, and welcome to another episode of the Salesman Podcast. On this episode, we have Kurt Shaver, and we're taking a slightly different angle on social selling, and it's less do this on LinkedIn and on Facebook and over email and Twitter, and more where social selling came from, what it is really. Is it this game-changing, paradigm-shifting thing that all salespeople have to get involved with, or is it just for certain niches such as the tech industry? And then we look at a little bit of where things are moving, and in 12 months' time, what salespeople will be doing with regards to creating content, curating content, being the expert, and that kind of thing. Kurt Shaver himself is recognized as one of the top 25 channel executives to know. He's won Channel Partner Excellence Awards. He's been in social selling from before it was social selling, he told me in the show today, and we get quite deep on all of this. You can learn more about Kurt over at thesalesfoundry.com, at Kurt Shaver on Twitter. And with all that said, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, Kurt, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Hey, well, looking forward to it.
Good stuff. Okay, so we're going to talk about social selling. It's a huge topic, and so we're going to jump straight in. And as a social sales trainer since 2011, where I want to start with all this, and to build a kind of base to go off for the rest of the show, do you think that social selling has changed over that period? How salespeople use it, how many salespeople use it, or do you think it's just the tools themselves that have changed?
Well, I would say that it's really the adoption that has changed the most. Back in 2011, when I focused exclusively on, wasn't even called social selling, right? The term was not even around in 2011. And that also happens to be when LinkedIn went public. So we're celebrating the 5-year anniversary this month of LinkedIn going public. So back then, people would really just call it maybe LinkedIn sales training or LinkedIn prospecting and that type of thing. And it was really a very early adopter market, right? Because people still thought of LinkedIn as a resume site more than anything. But certainly at the point that we are now here 5 years later in 2016, I would say that it's reached that mainstream. Every company is still not doing it, but it's definitely reached mainstream. Most sales and marketing leaders know the term social selling. They sort of get the idea of leveraging social networks. And so it's really come a long way in terms of the adoption in 5 years.
Okay, so 2 questions here, and they'll probably follow on from each other. Who created the term social selling, or did it just naturally bubble up and evolve? And to follow on from that, did LinkedIn drive all this then, from how you just described the timeline of things?
Well, I'm not sure exactly who. I think I've seen the term social selling attributed to a few different people.
Is that people just trying to claim it?
Well, no, I'm not sure, because they were in it actually very early. Nigel Edelstein was one person that was very early involved with it. In terms of maybe popularizing it, I would probably credit Coca Sexton, maybe with, again, not necessarily inventing it, but maybe really popularizing it, right, in his initial role at Inside View and then subsequently at LinkedIn. But certainly LinkedIn really as well helped drive it into an awareness globally. Again, initially in 2011, when I started training and when this kind of all got going, there wasn't even a specialized group within LinkedIn, which is now called LinkedIn Sales Solutions. LinkedIn Sales Solutions did not exist in 2011. So LinkedIn was not focused on this. They weren't selling Sales Navigator. It didn't exist. But since that time, all the content marketing and all the really awareness, I think, for social selling, mostly I would attribute to LinkedIn pushing it.
Cool. And a massively cliched question here, but I think it's an important one to ask. is there a difference between social selling and selling, or is it just the tools and the platforms that we're communicating over?
I think first it's the mindset, Will, that is really important for people. Before we even get into the tools, people have to sort of understand the mindset of it. And there's two kind of fundamental elements of social selling to understand is the mindset. So one of them is really the network connectivity and the fact that you can see relationships and who might have common relationships with prospects and things like that you're trying to meet in order to leverage the traditional selling, networking, and Rolodex aspect of gaining introductions and referrals. So that's the first part. It's really network or database oriented. Okay, the second part of the social selling mindset is understanding that that sort of content engagement part, that inbound marketing, that sharing of valuable content with your network in order to raise your credibility and visibility and sort of attract the customers to you because they see you as a thought leadership. And that's a very marketing-like mindset that salespeople are sometimes quick and sometimes slow to wrap their minds around.
So this is brilliant. And I'm going to throw this one at you, and I don't know what your answer is going to be, so I'm intrigued, because some people have said, it's been split 50-50. I think I can clearly say that. Should salespeople be curating their own content? Should they be all over social as their own personal brand to become a thought leader of sorts within their industry? Or should they be sharing the content from the company they work for, and there should be perhaps someone in the company who's the thought leader and they're in a more traditional sales role underneath them? What are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that are really kind of a balance in the middle. Okay, and I'll explain that.
Okay.
So when I'm training companies, I categorize the types of content that salespeople should be selling into three buckets. Okay, bucket number one is your company created content, stuff that Marcom makes, right? That goes on the websites and blogs and press releases and white papers and product releases and all that stuff marketing makes. Okay, so category number one is your company content. Category number two is industry content. So whether you're in financial services or telecom, or you're in staffing and recruiting or marketing, whatever you have, IT, whatever you happen to be, there's industry news that you get from trade associations, news magazines, and things like that. Okay. The third bucket is your own content, things that you as the individual are creating, right? You can probably think of it in most instances as like a blog, but it would be things that you're generally creating. So for a dyed-in-the-wool, 100% full-time, tried and true B2B salesperson, so my recommendation is that people kind of walk before they run. So I recommend that they focus first on curating company content and industry news. Don't really focus on creating their own content. Again, I'm talking about rank and file salespeople, not authors, speakers, thought leaders, folks like that. They need to be creating content. But the average salesperson at a corporation, to me, that's going too far right now, right? Maybe in a year, but right now that's going too far. So if we just look at those first two buckets, the other recommendation is to have a ratio of maybe 2 or even 3 to 1 when it comes to industry news versus your own company information. Because sometimes I joke, you don't want to be just seen as like a company parrot that's just repeating exactly what's on the blog side, because you're not adding any value. Mm-hmm. So as a salesperson, you should be up to date on industry news, share that with your network, and oh yes, every once in a while, put in some of your own company's information.
Okay, so this leads to perhaps a deeper question then. Is it okay to just be adding people on LinkedIn and you've got your profile on there looking good with all the details, and there's your contact information so potential customers can reach out and communicate with you on there, and you're sharing this information through LinkedIn post, perhaps you're tweeting it? Is that okay? Is that what you envisage the B2B salesperson platform to be? Or should they have a blog or a hub that they own, so to speak? and when you mentioned then creating their own content, maybe in a year's time, is that a shift that you see happening more and more as well?
Yes, it is a shift, but again, I mean, my opinion is that there's the ideal and there's reality, right? So the ideal is this glorious vision of each individual totally empowered. Everyone has the quill of Shakespeare and they can create their own content and they have plenty of time and they're not answering managers' reports or sending out proposals or responding to customer things. All they're doing is sharing their beautiful thoughts, right? I don't think that is reality for the average corporate salesperson. They got a lot of stuff on their plate. So again, there is so many benefits and so much to be gained if they just got good at a couple of pieces of engagement. One is we were talking about sharing content, whether it's from the company or third party. But then there's also just commenting on things, right? Getting in the game. It might not be sharing content. They might be commenting on posts or commenting on discussions in LinkedIn groups, right? I mean, if they get good at those fundamental things, they are really going to be driving more leads into their business without ever having to created their own content. I just think that is that's the ice, that's the cherry on the icing on the cake. It's a super high goal for people that can carve out that time, have the expertise, and could do a good job writing, but not the majority of B2B salespeople right now.
Well, that leads me to another discussion point, which again is fundamental and I don't think is really being talked about. And I've not had anyone on the show to talk about it specifically. So again, Kurt, I'm going to invite you to give us your thoughts on it. And that is like the scalability of social selling. Is social selling, and should it be, and should sales have always been and always will be about a one-to-one connection with a prospect? Because that's how I see the split between marketing and sales, in that marketing can throw out a message, they can throw out a piece of content on whether it's the company blog or whatever mechanism they're doing it. Perhaps they've got an ideal customer avatar, but there's no technology and it's just not a human way of connecting with people, a human-to-human way of connecting to people, which is what salespeople do. It's the value they can add. And it's how I see in the social selling space that they can do really well through adding comments and things like that, which a marketer can't automate. Or they can spam, but they can't do it effectively. So is that the split here? That salespeople should be pushing out content to individuals on a bespoke basis, which means they don't have to perhaps create loads of content? Or should they be going for a little bit of scalability in what they're doing?
So that is a great point. So I think they want to go for scalable, personalized content, right? So it's sort of this compromise, and that's where a company is really getting the advantage of the sales person, because the difference between, you nailed it, the difference between the marketing department and the salesperson is that the salesperson is focusing on a smaller market, right? They've got their territory, they've got their vertical focus, or they've got their key accounts that they're managing. They've got a much smaller focus. I mean, there might be 50, 100, 1,000 salespeople. So there are all these tiny little audiences that make up the aggregate market that marketing tries to address, right? But the difference is that the salespeople have relationships with these people. That's the basis of social networking. And one of my friends at SAP shared this great quote that I like, and I believe he attributed it to the CEO of SAP. And what the CEO used to say was, nobody buys software from a glass building, right? And the idea there is that all the marketing is a faceless thing. It doesn't have relationships, right? I mean, what does marketing have? They have a website, they have a LinkedIn company page, they have a Twitter account, they have a Facebook account, and things like that. But it's a thing. The individual salesperson, right, that's working in London, in Dubai, in New York, in Omaha, right, wherever they happen to be, they've got relationships with people that should be represented in their LinkedIn, Twitter accounts, followers, whatever it happens to be. And so they're able to break things down in some cases. Again, we're not talking about personalized one-to-one, because they can do that with an email message. What we're talking about is one to many, but not as many as marketing. Let me give you a really specific...
Let me just jump in there, Kurt, just to make that clear. So sales, and again, it's all opinions, and it depends on your industry, It depends on how big your audience. I appreciate all that. But are you saying that salespeople should be sending perhaps one email to 10 people that are all niched together and grouped together. Or what I was alluding to originally was that perhaps they shouldn't be doing that, and they should be spending their time writing a bespoke email that isn't just, the person's name's pasted in automatically at the front.
Right.
It should be, hi, I've not spoken to you in a while, but I've not spoken to you since this date. I sent you this bit of content. You enjoyed this. We chatted about this. And obviously it takes way more time. But is that still more effective? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think the answer to that, like many things today, is it's not an either or. It's going to be all of those, right? So, I mean, as a salesperson, we talk about one-to-one communication, right? I mean, you might use this, right?
I've seen one of those in a while.
So yeah, just think, you can talk in it. You might use this, which is sort of like you're talking about the typing them in individual email, but what the social network gives you is it gives you the scale, right? It gives the individual, in this case a salesperson, gives the individual a scale that's sort of akin to what marketing has, right? With website followers and LinkedIn followers and things like that, blog subscribers. So it's akin to what marketing has, but it's on a much smaller level. So it's this idea of the sales. Each salesperson becomes a mini marketer. And one of the great examples that I wanted to share with you that I think might help the listeners understand this is, salespeople can react to things much quicker, right? A marketing department oftentimes puts together their editorial calendar, their content calendar, 6, if not 12 months in advance, right? And they got all these things played out, and this is our launch, and we're going to go to this trade show then, and this magazine is going to focus on this topic, and we've got ads, and right? So they're planning way, way, way in advance. So they can't react as quickly. So here's a specific example. So one of my clients is in business insurance, right? They do property and casualty business insurance for a big company. And they happen to be based in the middle of the United States in an area that really doesn't get frozen too often, right? In the winter, doesn't get frozen too often. But they were having a couple of years ago in the US, they had the coldest winter in about 40 years. And he saw in the paper that sub-zero Fahrenheit temperatures, right, coming to the US, which meant everything was going to freeze. Okay. So he knew, like, the newspapers were saying everything's going to freeze in like 2 or 3 days. And nobody in this area of the country knew how to handle freezing temperatures, right? They didn't know about things like letting the faucets drip, opening the cupboards so they get the heating from the house, wrapping things in towels. They didn't know about all those things because it only happens every 40 years. Okay. So what he did was, again, he's in the business of protecting businesses, right? He's in the property and casualty insurance business. So he went and found an article, how to avoid frozen pipes. Okay. Now that's not directly related to anything about insurance, not directly. So he found this article, how to avoid frozen pipes, and he posts it to his network of like 700 LinkedIn connections. Okay. He said he got more reactions, more thank yous, more comments on that article than anything he ever posted from his company or about the industry of insurance, because it was so timely, it was so local, and it was so valuable that only he could do because he was in that little patch, right? And that's the power of having an individual salesperson really dialed into providing valuable content to their network on a mass basis.
Okay, let me turn this on its head then, Kurt. Should sales and marketing be the same team, split into these little niches where, it could be your location, it could be parts of the industry, whatever it is, the software or the product that you're selling?
Yeah.
Should you have a marketer and a salesperson working together using guerrilla marketing tactics, which is kind of along the lines of what you just described then? Is that how I don't even know what you'd call a department, but is that how things should be moving towards with the impact and the fact that everyone communicates over social now?
I wouldn't be surprised, Will. I wouldn't be surprised if things really start to move that way. And maybe there's much more emphasis. I mean, I know a lot of the organizations that I work with, larger organizations, have a team called field marketing, and they are very closely aligned with the salespeople. And social networks really provide the the best basis I've ever seen for sales and marketing to work together. We already talked about the fact that the individual salesperson has to adapt a marketing-like mentality in order to leverage the content sharing advantages of social networks. So that all goes to say it is really kind of blending. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe those kind of, they're still extreme functions and responsibilities and activities that only one or the other is going to do. Marketing is not going to be responsible for closing a contract, right? And sales is not going to be responsible for standing up a website. But when it comes to generating leads in the field, you're going to see, I think, a lot more blending and teaming like you indicated.
Awesome. I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show, Kurt, but just before we get to them, I like to have a couple of practical takeaways for the audience from each guest that comes on. So I've got a couple of questions here for you. First one, is LinkedIn primarily the place for our B2B audience? Is that the place they should be spending 90% of their time when they're social selling?
I would say yes, right? Because the LinkedIn, obviously, it gives you the ability to target people based on the key demographics that most B2B people want to identify their prospects with, which is title, company, industry, location, right? If you can answer those questions for your ideal prospect and you can type them into the search engine and find them on LinkedIn, I think you're way ahead, right? It's not the only answer. There's certainly other social networks where you're going to pick up triggers and insights and things about your prospects. But if you had to pick one and get really good at it, definitely it would be LinkedIn.
And just give us just a very quick 2-minute overview of what you mean by triggers there. We've covered it before on the show, but for anyone who hasn't listened to those episodes.
So triggers could be anything like the events that LinkedIn tells you in that keep in touch feature, right? It could be things like, hey, they got a new promotion, new job, they were mentioned in the news, they're having a work anniversary, or it could be things like, hey, here's industry news, the company is merging with this company, or we just released the new product, right? So any of those things that represent a change, they're going to give you some type of an open door to maybe reach out or gain some insights into your prospect in order to, kind of to break through and get their attention. Those are what we're looking at trigger events, which are all over the place on social networks if you know how to find them.
And they're so powerful as well. It's something that in medical device sales, I never did well enough of reporting to the surgeons what's going on within the hospital, what's going on within the trust, because they're head down, in theatres all day. They've not got the time and they've probably not got the interest to sift through every single bit of politics that's going on within the hospital. And that's something I really, looking back, that was a huge mistake for me. So yeah, I think that's going to be really useful for the audience. So Kurt, as I said, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. First one is, who is the world's greatest salesperson?
No question in my mind. The world's greatest salesperson is whoever invented the bottled water industry and got millions or billions of people to pay for what comes out of the faucet for free.
It's crazy, and perhaps timely because 50 Cent's in court at the moment at the rapper, but he had a stake in some bottled water company that Coca-Cola bought, and his fortune, which seemingly he's subsequently lost, came from that rather than rap music, which blew my mind the other day when I was listening about it.
Amazing. So there you go. 50 Cent is the greatest salesperson ever.
What is one book or resource that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
Well, yeah, this is an oldie, but if people haven't read it, this is like published in 1935 or something like that. But if people haven't read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? That's a fundamental thing that you've got to read. And I would say, and before, as everyone is rolling their eyes and thinking about, what, my God, this old tomb, how can that be, right? So if you read it with a social selling mindset in mind, right? And as you go through every page, think about like, wait, how does this apply to Twitter? How could this apply to LinkedIn or Facebook? How does this apply, right? Because it's all about relationships, growing your network, building rapport, strengthening those ties, right? That's what the whole book is about. And so if you read it with that sort of mindset of how does this apply to the new tools, then you'll really be ahead of the game.
Awesome stuff. And one more before the final question. Kurt, what motivates you personally to close more deals?
So what I like about closing deals is that I'm just going to be so when I close the deals, that means I'm going to be training some company on social selling skills, right? So I just like turning on salespeople into more effective ways for them to grow their business, right? So it's a more effective prospecting method in terms of kind of that outbound prospecting, but in most cases, it's a totally new activity for them to get into this content sharing mindset. And so it's just fun to see the light bulbs go off, like this insurance guy that shared an article about avoiding frozen pipes, right? When that bulb goes off in their head and they sort of get it and what their value and service is to the client, that's what turns me on about closing a deal.
Final question, Kurt, from me before we wrap up the show, and you tell us a little bit more where the audience can find out more about you and the different things that you can offer. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at sales?
So I think I would say that the best thing is to actually drill deeper with your customer. And what I mean by that is, whether it's spending more time with them, whether it's asking more questions with them, whether it's really understanding their business. I think when you have a particular opportunity that is in your pipeline, there's almost not too much that you can do in order to understand the situation, find where you can bring value, deliver some things that are going to differentiate you from the competition in order to increase the chances that you win that business. So I would just say really, work hard and think about what can you do on this particular opportunity that's in hand right now in order to close it.
And just to wrap up, you mentioned go deeper then, which is, again, it's the fundamental keystone of sales, and it's why we're different to marketing in that you're having these one-on-one connections with people. You're building an actual relationship a lot of the time. And if you're not building a relationship, you've probably just been replaced by an online order form. I think it's as simple as that in the internet age. Does social media allow us to get deeper, or does it encourage salespeople to be more spammy and to try and go down the marketing route perhaps, and to have lots of leads in a pipeline rather than a few really qualified ones?
So it can do either, really. It can absolutely go either way. So, and that's kind of ties back to the point that I just made. I think that what social media is great for is sort of extending your listening radar and kind of helping sort of promote information. But hey, when that inbound lead, right, some way, shape, or form, they can generate an inbound lead. But when that inbound lead happens, or you discover that trigger event, right, or somebody comments on something you post, okay, that's when you need to switch from this like wide focus and blasting information out. That's when you need to get this laser focus and go back to this drill deep, right? Once you've uncovered, hey, this is now an opportunity. So I think social media, I've said this many times. So I think social media is really most important as a lead generation skill, right? Get the lead started. Once it's started, then I think that most of your success is still going to be very tried and true sales tactics, which are those focus things we talked about.
Fantastic. Kurt, tell us where we can find out more about you, what you do, and also your website URL as well.
Sure. Thanks, Will. So obviously you can find me on LinkedIn, Kurt Shaver, KurtShaver, and I'd love to connect with you. You can also find out more about me and my business at my website, and the company is thesalesfoundry.com, and I know you'll have that in the show notes, Will.
Good stuff. And Kurt, with that, I want to thank you for your time today, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Great. Thanks a lot.
And there we have it. Thank you, Kurt, for coming on the show. Massively appreciate it. There's probably a lot more to look at with the ideas and the concepts of social selling and what it really means for salespeople in 2016 and beyond. So we'll have Kurt back on the show to talk about that in the future. Thank you, the audience, as always, for tuning in. Massively appreciate it. And with that, I'll speak with you all again tomorrow.